Welcome to memoQ Talks, where we talk to industry leaders about their experiences, lessons learned, and what works best across all areas of localization. Now here's your host.
Giulia, welcome to memoQ Talks. To say we are honored to have you here would be an understatement, because I obviously looked at your profile and we have been talking to each other quite some time now, and this looks like the most complete localization experience that I ever seen on the buyer side. So I'm delighted to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. It's amazing to be here.
Thank you. And actually, we are sitting here in the beautiful Navia district of Milan, Italy, although the weather is not so beautiful. So I already said I'm sorry about the rain, but you said you like the rain. So.
I do. I like the sound it does when it falls into my umbrella.
Right. So my guest is Giulia Tarditi, who is head of language experience at Revolut, and I'm very intrigued to learn more about the journey there and what the language experience looks like at a progressive financial firm like Revolut. I didn't want to see Nubank or I don't even know what Revolut terms themselves these days. But before we get to it, please like the video if you do and subscribe to memoQ Talks. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcasting platforms. So when I'm preparing for a conversation, I always look at the profile of my guest mostly on LinkedIn. And like I said, I've been greatly impressed by what I saw her. And what I also saw in your past experience is that you are passionate about customer experience, and you have been working on that with many European startups and companies that are in the process of scaling up. And for those in the audience who are not necessarily familiar with the concept, can you introduce the concept of customer experience to us the way you see it?
So everything we experience around us, everything that we use, whether it's an app or a website, everything we buy, we interact with through an experience funnel. And to me, localization was a massive opportunity to get closest to the concept of experience management, because in the end, you can have the most perfect localized app or website or PR in the world, but is it perfect under which angle? Is it linguistically correct, or does it sound nice, or is it thought through to be consumed by someone that needs to have an experience through it? Right? And what do you want that experience to look like for this person to have the right impression of your company, of your brand? And for this impression and for the experience they go through to have an impact on their life as a customer. On the likelihood that they recommend your product. And so seeing localization through an experience angle means not thinking of localization or translation per se, but as a means to an end, and the end being guaranteeing an experience that is conducive to whatever the company wants the end user to do with their products, their brand, and to ensure that prospects become engaged users, and engaged users become ambassadors of your brand and referrer of other people.
Thank you. But your job title doesn't say customer experience, it says language experience right now. So how does this whole thing translated into language experience? Is language experience a kind of a virgin territory that you have been instrumental in creating? So what is the relationship between the two? What is language experience and what is the relationship with customer experience?
Yeah, so language experience to me is crafting this audio, verbal, textual elements in a way that ensures an optimal experience for the customer and something that gets them to come back for more. When we engage with a product and with a service, we come with preconceptions of sort, we come with expectations, and those expectations will form the way we interact with a product or a service. And then what happens during the interaction will form, alongside the expectations, the relationship that you have with the brand. And so localization and language experience can work on two fronts: on creating those expectations so that they're the right ones when you localize for the marketing, for the brand, for people that are not yet customers, and then ensuring that the interaction when they finally get to use a service or a brand are spot on. The voice is right. There's an understanding of what the user has come to do with that particular product or screen or funnel in the product, and ensuring that the linguistic element is conducive to supporting the goal of the user, right? The goal of the customer when it comes to the brand, and the goal of the company in ensuring that that customer comes back or completes an action or whatever it is that it does. But it's not always just the completion of the action. It's also ensuring that they come back for more. And so it has this double goal, right? The company's goal and the user's goal, and the fine line where those two meet is language experience.
Thank you. When I was looking at your background, I'd say it's really multifaceted. I don't even know if I pronounce this right. It's easier to write than speak this. But there's languages, intercultural studies, sociology, marketing, communication. Can't even list this in one breath. You ended up in buyer-side localization. So how did everything on this list culminate into this passion that is languages, that is localization, especially on the buyer side? I know this is a lot of questions all at once, but take your time and take it the way you want people to see this. Languages
came easy to me. I remember my mom taught me how to read when I was 3 years old. She had this box, it looked like a table game, and there were some tools, like games to teach children, to introduce children to reading. Yes, I think that was the goal. But to me, to the concept of language and how a language forms, right? What constitutes the elements of a language, the phonetic elements, the sort of syntax of a sentence, like putting together all of the different elements in a sentence. And I think that was the foundation. And that's, I think that's what made me love languages so much. It just went under my skin from a very early age, right? And it stayed there like a tattoo. And then I really wanted to explore languages more. I really wanted to be able to read all of those beautiful books my mom had of foreign literature. She had them translated in Italian, but I wanted to be able to read them in the original versions. And so I made a commitment to myself. I made a promise to myself. It was the first promise I made to myself. One day I'll be able to read all of these in their original versions and to really enjoy, to really understand what the author wanted to convey, right? And what the reader was meant to feel in the first place, like unaffected by the translation layer. So that's how I got into languages in the first place, and into the habit of making promises to myself. And I think both things really helped me as I got through my career. I studied intercultural communication because I really wanted to get to understand how people talk to each other in codes, like codified manners, and how that translates into outcomes of the interaction. And sociology was also important to me to understand how that happens within the context of a society. And the languages part, a bit self-taught, a bit studied at university. When I did a degree in journalism, but I would have been a very average journalist, I think, because I was in love with writing and with the language element of it, but I never felt the passion towards the news story that I think you need in order to be a top journalist, right? And to me, it's always about the language itself. And so I got into copywriting straight after my degree, and the company I was working for was exploring the concept of localization. They didn't really know what it was, but they didn't know how to do it. I think one of the big LSPs pitched the idea of why not having a big vendor translating the concept as opposed to having Giulia writing it 4 times in 4 different languages. And so I went to my boss at the time and said, please let me own it. And it was hard for me to make that step because I was enamored with the idea of writing. And so I had to go from actually doing the doing to overseeing how the process was done. And I've never been a master of letting go. But I think that ended up allowing me to craft a space for myself where that was like at the crossroad between writing, communication studies, and languages applied to the digital space, because that's where jobs were back when I was just coming straight out of uni. And London, the startup scene was very sort of infamous, and it was quite easy to find a job there versus maybe more streamlined or more traditional outcomes out of journalism school. And I think that that really made me. Those first experiences, I went from startup to startup. When I landed at Badu, it was a massive opportunity. In 3 years, we went to 43 languages, and I was able to really put my idea to the test and to get numerical results from it, right? If I localize something not in the traditional way that was done at the time, which was I'm just going to take a source text and I'm just going to translate it, but I'm going to use the source text as an indication of what I want to say, and I'm going to apply the copywriting principle to it and just try and recreate something in a different languages that sounds as if I'd been writing it in that language in the first place. The results were positive, and I didn't take this approach sort of copy paste in the other various companies I went to afterwards, but it gave me a boost to understand that my space was the transformative space of localization. Like I would take a program and I would try and craft it around the goals of the company that I was tasked with doing this for, and the user base of this company, trying to understand the motives, getting under their skin, and sort of understand what drives these users and what drives this company, and how can localization be a catalyst to the goals that they both have.
Right. You mentioned that you actually did work for a language service company at one point.
I didn't. I consulted for...
That was a misunderstanding on my side, because you also sometimes say that you have limited experience with the agency side.
I do. I've only been working with them as in, outsourcing services to them, but I've never been on the vendor side. I've toyed with the idea a couple of times. I almost signed once and offered to go and work for an LSP in London that I think now has been acquired by one of the big guys. But again, it was because they thought they really wanted to jump into a transformational journey. And that appealed to me.
Yeah, that's what you're good at. But this is what my question was about. You must have worked with language services companies as a client, and in a given environment, whichever company you work for on the buyer's side, what was your experience working with these companies? What if you were instrumental in selecting these companies, what were your criteria, what were you looking for in them?
Yeah, again, the criteria would change depending on each of the companies and each of the the stages of a life journey of a company that we were at the time. I hold LSPs in high esteem. I think they do a really good job. Now, some of them more than others, perhaps, and it also depends on who your account manager is and whether they really understand what you want to do. I have a passion for more boutique services. The reason I never went into that space, as in work for a vendor, is because I feared this would not allow me to go in depth the way I want to. And I think this translates into what I think has been the biggest limitations of some of the vendors I've worked with. Is sometimes because they don't know the company that they're trying to pitch services to. They try and propose something that is not copycat, but that is quite off their catalog, right? Like a service off the shelf. We do this. It's priced like this. This is what it gives you. Versus trying and listen to what your potential customer is trying to do, what their goals are, and being ready to ditch that catalog and say, okay, right, so you guys need X, I can provide it. And in 99% of the cases, they would be able to.
Right.
But it's as if, the wheel is spinning and people are always in a rush and they're just trying to pitch to one more client. And so that voice of flexibility goes completely lost. And so what the potential buyer is hearing is, okay, they can't do what I ask. Yep. And I don't think that's the case. I think they have very capable people on their payroll, and they would absolutely be able to go and follow the transformational lead of the potential customer and supporting them in what they're trying to do. But for some reason, it's as if that communication flow is broken.
It's an interesting thing because I often attribute this to a level of pressure. So even, at memoQ, for which we do this podcast, is a tech service provider. And even there, we feel the pressure of standardize the services as much as possible while keeping up the flexibility to actually learn and meet the actual need of the customer. And it's also, for us, it proved kind of tricky, but not impossible to structure the service in a way that we can do both. And I can feel that some of these language service provider companies are under this pressure. So not necessarily communication or losing the communication is kind of a consequence of the pressure they are under. And which is, I can attest to them knowing what it's about, because even from back from 15 years ago when I used to teach translation technology, I keep telling my students that, listen, translation doesn't just hang in the air. It goes somewhere. It will be used for some purpose. It's not for itself. And they understood this, and they started expecting it to be part of the brief when we got into a translation task. What this communication, what this translation is for, how it will be used. And so, but I think it's an important message, and I think most of the people who work for language service providers and watching this episode will know what you're talking about.
I think of it this way: in 7 cases out of 10, maybe even 8, the standardized service works. It takes you through the pitch very quickly, and it sort of sedates that thirst that the customer has for services A, B, and C. But then there's, in 2 or 3 cases out of 10, it just falls flat.
Yep.
Right? And the problem is that it doesn't lead to a satisfying partnership. It may lead to a deal, but that deal is not even close to the size it would have been had there been flexibility around the services that you provide, the type of people you give, how you price them, right? Versus per word, per hour, per whatever it is.
Yep.
And I think the second item that perhaps creates also some disconnect between buyer and seller of linguistic services is the sort of data point around how one measures performance. It's usual for the vendor to say, well, we translate in excess of whatever million of words in a year, right?
Okay.
And that is impressive, surely, but it's not a goal.
No, it isn't.
In itself, right? It's not a result per se. It's a means to an end, right? But those words, like, did you reduce time to market? Did you slash cost per word? Like, how did that translate into an impact on what tends to be the triangle, right? Cost, speed, quality for the customer, or versus some other impact metric, which could be a net promoter score. Perhaps for the funnel, that net promoter score increase as a result of our translations or of our revisions of our translations. And so it's not always just down to the vendor, because if the end customer that is purchasing those services never provides the visibility of what the impact has been of the services, then the vendor doesn't know. But maybe the vendor can make an effort and as they initiate a partnership, saying, listen, we need the visibility to some of those impact metrics that you're going to be tracking with this. What impact metrics will you be tracking? How will you know whether this translation has been successful? And when you're pitching to a potential customer, bring those impact metrics with you, because then you speak the same language.
Right.
Otherwise, me buying translation services, I need to report internally to make a business case for it. And it's never, ever the number of words that go through my TMS. It's always going to be something about an impact I've generated for the company in any potential way, whether it's the time to market or the cost, or it could be the conversion of a funnel, improving that conversion to, I don't know if it's an onboarding funnel, the conversion to onboarded. Mm-hmm. Have I increased it or not? And so if this communication gap gets filled, when it gets filled, I think the partnership can evolve to a whole different level. And that can be a snowball effect, can have a snowball effect on any future pitches and relationship that you install with buyers, right? Because then it's on that level. It's on a very different level. It's not on a transactional level, like I give you something and you do whatever you see fit with it, and then we're done. But like I'm invested in your success and in hearing back whether that success is happening. And if not, iterate. If yes, enhance, upsell.
Thank you. No, I think the audience will find this very, very useful. However, I guess I'm not sure if you had been part of the decision, but I guess you used to work for organizations that decide to insource or partially insource localization. And when that happens, what is behind that decision, especially if there was a language service company at one point, and now the situation is that more of the localization happens in house. So how does that work? What's behind those decisions? If that can be in any way put in words that are not very, very specific, that only work for just one situation.
Yeah. I think to have a in-house language team as a company, you must have a solid understanding of the fact that language is a driver of engagement, of revenue, right? And you want to have a close control over it. over how it goes. It's not just like a necessary headache of doing business globally. You're like, oh gosh, I need to send those translations out and retrieve them and just build them into the next build of the app. It's you must acknowledge, you must know that for you that is key, and you want to have close control. And control, I don't mean that in a negative sense of the way, but like if it's in house, you can influence it, you can inform it, you can measure success of it much more closely, and you can iterate quickly. I think, in most companies, probably the ideal setup is a hybrid, but I've only ever seen an investment into bringing localization in-house where there is that understanding of how key of a piece it is for the success of the company, whether it's because the company has a substantial portion of their revenue coming from the non-English speaking cohort of users.
Yeah, I think on the buyer side, these are really impactful words but this is also something that I see happening, that buyers are becoming more and more aware of this and see more localization more and more as a driver rather than necessary, not even evil, but a nuisance that has to be done afterwards. And it's when it's no longer an afterthought. I don't know what you think of this, and this wasn't in the script, so I just fair warning that what I'm seeing, and this is very subjective, so that's one of the reasons I'm asking, is that when a company realizes that localization is not the best when it's done as an afterthought, and the language aspect becomes part of the production workflow, right from the start, then it tends to get broken up. So it's not a monolith anymore, and it makes it harder to outsource. What do you think of that? Because this is also something that I feel. I don't have any hard evidence, but I feel it on some buyer's side.
What you mean is that it gets when it's put closer to the source,
yep,
then it's not centralized anymore. But it's
maybe not.
Maybe the ownership of it is scattered around. I don't know. I think if a company needs an evangelist, you're an evangelist, right? Like, in order to understand how to do it properly. And to me, how to do it properly means having a central enablement function somewhere. And then, yes, you could have scattered touch points, close to the source, some marketing, brand, in support, in product, with perhaps a dotted line of the central function to a POC in each of these departments or touch points, but nevertheless without the need not to have a centralized function. Where it happens, I think it's in early stage companies, or in companies that are so large that even the presence of a central enablement team is not enough,
right,
to ensure the efficient flow across all of the different departments and stages of the funnel. And so they need to have one person in marketing, one person in SEO, one person here and there, that is responsible for localization. But being responsible for it doesn't mean getting the job done. It probably means just being responsible for the outcomes of it, and for these interactions with the central function, so that the interactions go through a single point of contact within the department, so that the department has a unite voice that tells the central function what they need. But I don't think there would be a scattered ownership of it necessary, right, that any stops there. There is nothing underneath.
Understood. Thank you. I want to ask, and don't tell us anything that you're not supposed to tell, but I'm really interested in how this goes in Revolut. I'm not 100% a disinterested party because I'm one of those millions who are Revolut customers. The entire family has a Revolut account. We use the Revolut app in multiple languages. So this is why I'm asking if there are any specifics of this work at Revolut that we can learn from.
Mm-hmm. Well, Revolut has an in-house language team, and I think that shows probably in the quality of the app. You've been using the Hungarian version of the app, and that was fine.
Yeah, I mean, I spotted like 2 things which were not even mistakes, but like peculiarities that I, as in relation to a traditional bank, I would say it differently, but I perfectly understood what was meant there. So
awesome. I think it's made with love. Right, and there's most of our linguists have been in-house for a number of years, which means they absolutely have invested long periods of time learning the product. They use the product. All of us, we're Revolut customers, and day in, day out, they're encouraged to use the product in the language that they localize for. They see stuff and they improve stuff day in, day out. There's 2 elements of experience management that are very important to localization. One is effort, and the other is satisfaction. So when you interact with the product, it needs to be easy. And I think localization has a big role to play there, because you can make the usage of the product, increase the usability of the product. So it's easier to do whatever you've come to, because you probably don't want to spend hours of your time using Revolut. You want to use it to get your stuff done and then move on to the rest of your day. So it needs to be easy to achieve what you've come for, and it needs to be satisfying. And it's not just whether you managed to get done what you've come for, but also whether it was pleasant to be there.
Right.
And I think tone of voice in relation to brand identity has a big role to play. And that's why, for example, my team works hand in hand with our head of copy to ensure that the tone of voice, even when there's a rebrand, for example, is really cascaded down into the language team, processed and adapted. Because it may not be that in Hungarian, the tone of voice guidelines that we use for the British market work perfectly. It's probably the direction comes from the central team. And then as a Hungarian linguist, you would understand the message and come up with updated and targeted guidelines for the Hungarian voice that sound exactly aligned with the brand, but also spot on for what the Hungarian users would want to hear, which means understanding who your users are. Like, how old are they? What are they doing? What products are they using? What are the most successful products in the market? What are the products that we're trying to push in the market? And the understanding of these 2 drivers, the effort and satisfaction, and how to convey them into the way you write, is paramount, I think, to the success of the language piece.
It's actually, it shows, but that I was kind of suppressing a smile at how old are they, because we in the family, at least, we have my son 19 and my dad 82.
And he
happens to be a linguist, by the way. So
amazing! I'd love to hear his feedback there.
So it's an interesting thing, but most of the time I see a good conversational style that doesn't sound unnatural. Some of the Hungarian banks do sound more unnatural. Although my Hungarian bank, it seems they are trying to copy the kinds of Revolut and others in their applications. because they are coming up with features in language similar to what
yes.
I've been with Revolut for
that means we're winning, right? Like if they feel the need to copy. Yesterday, I saw my dad taking out his new card from a mainstream Italian bank, and it's copied from our card, from our metal card. And that made me smile, because then you can, when you get to that point, you can either get angry or smile and be happy about it. And it's probably the second.
No,
right?
actually,
we're at that point
when the sometimes much stronger, at least but stronger competitor starts copying you, that's gratifying. I know the feeling, luckily, but
we want Revolut to be eventful and for the user experience to be sound and satisfying and effortless for everyone that uses a product. But knowing who users are doesn't mean that you're writing just for them, especially with like a specific cohort in mind. But it means ensuring you don't alienate anyone that is on that list. Right?
Yeah, that's important.
Specifically, usability of the language piece doesn't always go hand in hand with user experience. Sometimes when I hear people talking about user experience and usability interchangeably, I get upset, because usability is one element of user experience.
Yes.
But it only looks at the effort. It doesn't look at the satisfaction, right? And the satisfaction is important because these products, especially once they're on mobile, they're addictive, right? They're kind of gamified, and they need to be something that you enjoy using and exploring and telling your peers about them. And so I think that's where user experience has an extra gear.
I think you're completely spot on here. But I also wanted to ask about your personal perspective. So earlier on we discovered I had a word on the tip of my tongue that I forgot, but anyhow, we know that you have a passion for creating things, to effecting change, to renewing things, and to be able to build things. And what was that with Revolut? So what is in it for you at Revolut? What do you get to build? What is your space that you can be creative and instrumental in effecting these changes?
Most companies don't like change, like just most people.
I know.
Right? Even when they say they do.
I know.
But with Revolut, I had the impression very early on from my interview stage that they was in it, like they really were. Transformation was the key word, right? And transformation was not just going to be a milestone reached, but a continuous work in progress. And I thought that would really go hand in hand with what I was seeking, right? So for me, at Revolut, we've embarked on a transformational journey. We've introduced machine translation by investing in our own fine-tuned models, and also leveraging AI in the review step. So this is something that was absolutely not there a year and a bit ago when I joined. And now we're trying to extend that to other components of the content journey, not just the non-English and the localization language piece. And I think for me there's a massive opportunity to keep applying my drive for innovation and transformative power for users, right? Whether it's the users of your service, like someone in marketing that uses a central localization area, or the end users of the product, to create something that is really a growth leverage, an engagement driver for the company, and keep iterating, keep ensuring it works well, it's fast, you're never a bottleneck, and the performance bar keeps going up. To me, that's super important, because you never arrive.
No.
And otherwise,
Never.
I feel that my mission is an end. Right?
No, never.
And with the performance bar that keeps pushing, keeps going up, it's really aligned with the way I like to work And it also gives me space to keep crafting the language program and the content programs to ensure it's unlike any in the banking space, right? Revolut is revolutionizing the concept of bank, right? And what you can do, what a bank can do, what you can do with it, and what it can do for you. And I think that's how I approached my mission in localization, right? With the same transformative goal, and that's a good alignment, and hopefully for a good few years to go.
Absolutely, and it's very inspiring. This really made me want to check back in a year's time on what happened.
Awesome.
Since today.
But I will look forward to the feedback of that.
Absolutely.
Linguist in the family.
I will ask him, definitely. He's not using the app as extensively as I do, but he's using it quite a lot. I have one last question.
Yeah, go on.
And this connects to your passion of creating, effecting change. And this is something that you mentioned in your LinkedIn resume, is that I'm a diligent student of what I'm yet to master, which allows me to learn fast and continuously. And I want to put my learning to the test. I'm obsessive about my team's growth and development, which I invest in relentlessly. So I'm asking what's on the table right now? What is it that you are learning? What is it that you want to learn?
Okay.
What does it feel?
I'm a dual learner. So at work, I'm doing a lot of learning around our sort of time to market process for comps in general, because this is going to be the next frontier of my scope. And personally, I'm doing a lot of learning right now about breathing, the importance of breathing, and how to use it to relax and to drive performance in whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. There's so much to know about breathing. It's such a fundamental part of, it's one of those things that you take for granted, right? We all breathe, otherwise we wouldn't be here having a chat. But the way it's an instrument, it's a tool that you can use in so many different ways. And I started exploring it through my passion for yoga. And I had a question in mind, and I started wanting to know more. But what's in it? Like, how does it work? How does it translate into stimulus for the brain? How does that affect my ability to be on top of my game? And how can I use it to work better, to be a better mum at home, and to sleep better at night? And so this is what I'm exploring at the minute.
That's fantastic. Actually, that's something that comes to my mind. Not as much as I would want to go deep and learn more about it, but to be conscious about the bodily functions that we all take for granted. So that is a really important thing, and that's also very inspiring, I have to say.
Awesome.
And with that, I'd like to thank you for this conversation. I enjoyed it enormously. I hope you enjoyed being here.
Yes, I did.
And I'm pretty sure that our audience will be delighted and have a lot of takeaways from what you had to say. So thank you very much again. Thank you, everyone. Be sure to like and subscribe the video. Check it out on the other podcasting platforms, and see you in the next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining memoQ Talks, where we talked with industry leaders about their experiences and lessons learned to gain new insights about what works best across all areas of localization. Join us next time on memoQ Talks.